we will have a variety of things going on in today's chapel. To start with, I really have appreciated hearing the reflections of those of you who come from different cultures and talk about what you do for Christmas in your land. What I have asked from some faculty today is to see whether or not they would be willing to share a little bit about their experiences from here and being in different lands for Christmas. So we will hear today from Mr. Yoder, from Mr. Bauer, Mr. Mast, and then I will share a bit as well. And following that, we will have something special that a group of students has worked to put together. Mr. Yoder.
In 1984 and 85, my wife and I were privileged to teach in a foreign language department at Nanchong Teachers College in China. It's about a 10-hour car ride from Chengdu, the capital of Sichuan province. The city that we were in was closed to foreigners at that time because China was just opening up to foreigners. It was about 300,000 people. And the residents of the city and the college that we were at really did not know anything about Christmas. Christmas wasn't celebrated in China at that point. Somehow or another, the people that were there, the leaders, found out a little bit about Christmas because I know that our interpreter had spent time in the United States, and so at least he knew a little bit about Christmas and how important a holiday it was for us. But we were scheduled to teach on Christmas Day, and I personally hoped that we would teach on Christmas Day because I would have enjoyed telling everyone back home how we had to work on Christmas Day. But they insisted that we had to take the day off. We were aware that there were two churches in Nanchong. Obviously, the churches had been persecuted quite a bit in the last number of years, and we were interested in making contact with them, but did not make contact because it would have probably caused them some problem if they were connected anyway with foreigners at that particular point. So we had not made any connection with the churches. However, at Christmas time, the people in our college asked us if we would like to go to Christmas services. So Christmas Eve found us in a Catholic church that had just reopened after many years of being closed. And we sat in the balcony and observed the service, which was a very traditional Catholic service. If I recall correctly, the service was in Latin. There was some incense being swung around and things like that. We did recognize some of the hymns that were being sung because they were the tunes of familiar hymns, although they were in Chinese. After the service, we were invited to meet the, I guess he was the bishop that had come in for the service. And so we walked back through a courtyard in the church, and there was just little groups of peasants sitting around little fires, having their supper, talking to each other, etc., which seemed kind of strange until it was explained to us that these were peasants that had come in from the countryside for the Christmas Eve service, and because they had walked such a distance, they were not going to walk back and then come back the next day for the Christmas morning service, so they were staying overnight in the courtyard there. I remember thinking, this is about as close to the first Christmas as I'm going to get, what with people who are traveled from afar, so to speak, and no room at the inn because there wasn't any hotels for them to stay at, and the whole concept of God choosing to reveal God's self to the marginalized of society. It was a pretty neat experience to experience that. On Christmas morning, then, we were invited to what our host there is called the Christian church service, although they didn't understand that Catholics and Protestants were all Christians. But so we drove with our host to someplace in the city, and I would never be able to find this church anymore because we were taken back through little alleyways, etc., and eventually came to a little church, which was basically a room, and there was probably 50 or 75 people there in the room, and we sat there on the front row as the honored guests, and didn't understand what was going on, except for some of the hymns, again, we recognized. But the really interesting thing was, right after the service was over, all at once outside, there was just incredible explosion of firecrackers that went on for a couple of minutes. And our interpreter, with a little twinkle in his eye, said to us, "I guess this is the Chinese contribution to Christmas."
You can put up the first slide, Matt. Thanks. Travelers understand how our worldview is both shaped and limited by our family, friends, media, and cultural environment. Travel challenges truths that we were raised thinking were self-evident and God-given. Leaving home, we learn other people find different truths to be self-evident. We realize that it just makes sense to give everyone a little wiggle room. This is from Rick Steve's Travel as a Political Act, my summer book reading from this last summer here. You can go to the next slide, Matt. During the 2006-2007 school year, I lived in Kandern, Germany, volunteering at Black Forest Academy. Kandern is located in the southwestern tip of Germany. In 20 minutes, you could drive to France or Switzerland. Black Forest Academy is an English grades 6 through 12 Christian boarding school, primarily for missionary kids, with about 300 students. Missionary kids are sometimes called third culture kids and are raised in a country and culture that is different than their passport. At Black Forest Academy, I worked as a resident assistant, and with a team of other young adults and house parents, I helped to look after a dormitory of 28 high school boys. Next slide. And one more slide. The white building is where we lived. This year also happened to be my first Christmas spent away from home. I use quotes here when referring to home because after working with students at BFA, my definition of home got a little blurry. Of course, it sounds cliche, but that year in Germany, I did start to reflect strongly on what home meant to me. In December 2006, after BFA students left to go home to their parents in other countries all over the world, things got quiet in the dormitory, and my friends, colleagues, and I took advantage of Europe's robust, affordable public transportation system, taking trips to Prague, Czech Republic, and Heidelberg, Germany. Germany is well known for its traditional Christmas markets, full of good food and Glühwein, which is German for hot wine. You can go to the next slide, Matt, and go ahead and click through the next 6 or 8. Some pictures of current Christmas markets in Germany, some pictures taken by myself, but others from friends of mine that are still there, just to give you a little bit of a taste. This is the town of Kandern. So you get the idea. If you'd like to, you can pause on that one actually, Matt. If you'd like to experience something similar to this, Philadelphia does have a German Christmas market at City Hall, if you'd like to experience that. Something I noticed while in Germany is that consumerism has taken far less of a hold on German culture, and this was especially contrasted with American culture for me during the Christmas season. Germany is the country that Walmart proudly entered in 1997 with 85 stores and had to leave the country in 2006 with its tail between its legs because it couldn't make a profit. Corresponding with a friend by email that year, in 2006, my friend said, "Back in Pennsylvania, everything is pretty much the same. Busy roads, people Christmas shopping." For myself, talking again, for me, less advertisements, sales, and focus on shopping was refreshing and was something that I noticed then and has stayed with me ever since. Being away from family that year, Christmas Day was certainly the most unique I have experienced. I was able to spend a good part of it with a couple of close friends, but for much of it, I was on my own. You can go to the last slide, Matt. Back to my dorm. I remember taking a run through town by myself on the quiet Christmas morning, and then I returned to the large, empty, strangely quiet dormitory that I called home this year, and I was physically all alone. My colleagues and all students were away for the break, and I had this 15th century farmhouse all to myself. Fortunately, the Eagles happened to be playing the Cowboys that Christmas Day, And that night, I was actually able to watch it, the only game that I could watch live that year. During the game, I made calls home to family. I watched the Eagles beat the Cowboys 23-7 and reflected some more on what it means to go home for Christmas.
Okay. As many of you know, I grew up in Argentina, which is, you can see there, the south of South America. So most of my childhood I was there, and so a lot of my childhood memories of Christmas are shaped by my experience in Argentina. In Argentina, Christmas occurs in the middle of the summer, as in any southern hemisphere country. It's hot and humid, and most of the celebrations occur outside, right? Like it would be in Florida. It's really a time for family and friends to gather and share a meal outside, and usually it consists of a large cookout with grilled beef called an asado, and lots of different sides. You enjoy the meal together all evening, and you stay up till midnight on Christmas Eve. So some of the other foods that you eat at that time, this pan dulce, which is very much like the panettone that you can buy nowadays from Italian tradition. And then turrón de maní, which is just sort of like a nougat, a peanut nougat. So that'd be sort of a dessert. So those are some of the foods there. You do stay up till midnight, and so I still have, to this day, trouble. It doesn't feel right to actually go to bed before midnight on Christmas Eve. I have to stay up even if the rest of my family has gone to bed. I have to stay up till midnight and a little past on Christmas. Because at midnight, that's when the entire city will erupt in fireworks. It's so loud you can't even talk to each other. Everyone shoots off fireworks. It's sort of like the finale, if you think of the finale at a fireworks show. There isn't any official fireworks. It's everyone going out on the street and shooting off their own fireworks. And so it's very loud, lasts maybe a minute or so of this incredible racket. Once the fireworks die down, then presents are opened. It usually is just maybe one big present. It isn't a whole host of presents. Santa Claus is familiar, but usually they say the Christ child has brought the present to the children. There's not many gifts, as I said. The big gift day is Epiphany, when the wise men come, which is after New Year's, a couple days after New Year's. That's when more gifts are given. At midnight as well, everyone spills into the streets of the neighborhood and goes around wishing all the neighbors Feliz Navidad, checking in on neighbors who are also still up, of course, celebrating. And so you go throughout the neighborhood greeting everyone. You can see the Argentine flag there with some traditional Western decorations. Obviously, there's some influence of that in Argentina as well. But one of the things that has remained there is the idea of setting up pesebres or nativity scenes. Each house, or most houses, will have be proud of setting up a nativity scene that people in the neighborhood can watch and enjoy, or see and enjoy for display. Many of the churches as well would have that. So those are some of my memories of Christmas in Argentina.
It was 2010 and through the 2010-2011 school year when I was on sabbatical from here, and I was fortunate to work with Mennonite Mission Network, and I was in South Africa. So much as Mr. Mast spoke about, one of the things I needed to get used to was Christmas time was summer. The house I lived in was plaster over mud. It was hot, but I was fortunate because I had very large fans that I could use to keep the house relatively cool. There were many American customs that had been assimilated over there, and I still remember one of my memories and times of great disconnect was when I was in a grocery store. in the next town over, about 28 kilometers from where I lived. There are these artificial plastic Christmas trees on display in this grocery store. Languages of, I'm going to try this, Xhosa and Afrikaans were being spoken. And then I hear Gene Autry sing Frosty the Snowman, being piped in over the stereo. There was just this total disconnect. It just did not match up, but it is what it was. I also had a friend who came and visited me the weeks prior, so we made Christmas cookies out of our traditions and then delivered them to some of my South African friends as gifts. The church I was with when I was there, Grace Community Church, was comprised mostly of the workers of these very large, massive sheep farms. They would have a service and a feast, again, as Mr. Mast said, but it was celebrated the Sunday before Christmas, and it was done outside in a city park. The men would braai, or barbecue lamb, was the meat of choice. The women, the omas, would make braaibrood over the hot coals, and it's some of the best bread you have ever eaten. There was dancing, passionate preaching, and great singing of Christian music. The spirit and joy of celebration was just simply incredible. There were well over a couple of hundred people there, including all of the kids that were there. The days leading to Christmas Eve and the day itself are ones I will not forget. There was a group of us that worked in the community and in the Plakkerskamp, or it's kind of a squatters camp, which is comprised of huts that were made of just corrugated tin. There was no electricity, no water. And we had set a goal of making many meals that we could serve on Christmas morning. I had been given a bunch, pounds and pounds and kilos of lamb the week prior to Christmas, as had many others in the community, and our task was to cook it throughout the week in preparation for Christmas Day. Christmas Eve itself was spent at a friend's house, helping them prepare food for the next day, and then making burgers and laughing and having a fine time. They had made me part of their very unique family. And then the next day, Christmas Day, early in the morning, we met in one of the buildings in town and assembled the meat with potatoes and veggies into a lamb stew that would then be delivered to the Plakkerskamp. I was amazed at the number of people who kept showing up to both help prepare and to deliver the food. It was a community effort that represented almost all of the ethnic groups in the town. When some started delivering food to the camps, while some did that, others stayed behind and kept assembling the food until it was all gone. At one point, I did get out into the camp, and it was a quite actually thoughtful time. While it was very satisfying to help these folks, I did have to wonder, and I still wonder to this day, I wonder how they are doing now. Why was this done just on Christmas? And what could be permanently impacting for these people, some of whom I consider to be my friends? It is very, very complicated in South Africa. But the one comment that was made that I remember from that Christmas morning came from one woman who said, it was just like the story from the Bible of the fishes and the loaves. The food just kept coming and coming and coming. And honestly, I do not know how it happened, but I do know that when that morning was over, between 700 and 800 people had been served a Christmas meal. Christmas evening was also spectacular, but in a very different way. Some friends of mine on the other end of the spectrum, the economic spectrum, who owned a farm, were going far out into the veld, into one of their homes on their farm. It was a warm summer's night. I was with a family who had also made me feel part of theirs. The stars in the South African sky are amazing, and I believe that was the first time I saw the constellation of the Southern Cross, and that was an awesome moment. That was also the day I still remember it, Mr. Yoder, and I've told you this before, that I got a message from Mr. Yoder, an email, just saying, someone's thinking of you. Just want you to know we're thinking about you. And that was my Christmas in South Africa. And if you ever want to hear more stories, you let me know, or more stories about Christmas in the Netherlands, as Sam has talked about, I would be happy to fill you in on those as well. Now, one of the traditions I had in my own family growing up was the reading of the Christmas story from Luke 2. I first remember hearing it in my grandmother's house in Kansas, where all of my aunts and uncles and all of my cousins would gather. And then at my parents' house, it became part of our tradition there as well. Before we would eat on Christmas afternoon, there was always the reading from Luke 2. It was usually my dad who did this, and then as I got older, somehow I was asked to do it. Initially, I probably didn't like it too much, but I grew to respect it and know that it was an honor to be asked to do a reading from Luke 2. And to this day, the tradition continues in the households of all of my siblings. The three of them still do it when they are with their kids and their grandkids. If I get really honest, sometimes when I hear Luke 2, I still get pretty misty and pretty sentimental when I read it, as it reminds me of absolutely wonderful times with family and friends who are no longer here. Yet, it is so excellent to see that the hope and love of the story continues on to the next generation. And around my ancestors' tables through the years, Luke 2 would have probably been read in Dutch, in German, in French, in Plautdietsch, and in English, possibly Polish and Russian as well. I have asked several students to come on up here and assist me, and they have agreed to share different verses of Luke 2 in their languages. And I hope you take this as a gift and an understanding of how great our God is, how vast our God is. So we are going to have this read in multiple languages, and then I will read it in English after each individual has done so.
V těch dnech vydal Cezar Augustus nařízení, aby v celé říši proběhlo sčítání lidu. Toto sčítání proběhlo předtím, než se Quirinius stal správcem Sýrie.
In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria.
Tout le monde allait se faire recenser, chacun de la localité dont il était originaire. C'est ainsi que Joseph, lui aussi, partit de Nazareth et montant de la Galilée en Judée, à Bethléem, la ville de David. Il appartenait en effet à la famille de David.
And everyone went to their own town to register. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David.
Para inscribirse junto con María, su esposa. Ella se encontraba encima y mientras estaban allí le llegó el tiempo del parto.
He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born.
Dajo lini djalin e saj të parë lindur. E mbështolli me pelena dhe vendosin në një garazh, sepse në han nuk kishin vend për ta. Tani në atë po të kërhin disa barin rrinin jashtë, e fusha dhe natën ruanin këpen e tyre.
And she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them. And there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night.
Door de verschijning van de engel werd de omgeving in een helder licht gezet. De herders beefden van angst, maar de engel stelde hen gerust. Wees niet bang, zei hij, want ik breng u het mooiste nieuws dat u ooit hebt gehoord. Het is groot nieuws voor het hele volk.
An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people.
Il Salvatore, proprio il Messia, il Signore è nato stanotte a Betlemme, Come potete riconoscerlo? Troverete un bambino avvolto in una coperta che giace in una mangiatoia.
Today, in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. This will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger.
그러자 갑자기 수많은 하늘의 군대가 나타나 그 천사와 함께 가장 높은 하늘에서는 하나님께 영광, 땅에서는 하나님의 은총을 받은 사람들에게 평화 하며 하나님을 찬송하였다.
Suddenly, a great company of the heavenly host appeared with the angel, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest heaven, and on earth peace to those on whom his favor rests."
Kai angelai nuo jų pakilo į dangų, piemenys kalbėjosi, eikime į Betlėjų ir pažiūrėkime, kas ten įvyko, ką viešpats mums paskelbė. Jie nuskubėjo, rado Mariją, Juozapą ir kūdikį paguldytą ėdžiose.
When the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about." So they hurried off and found Mary and Joseph and the baby, who was lying in the manger.
Увидев же, рассказали о том, что было возвещено им о младенце сем, и все слышавшие дивились тому, что рассказывали им пастухи.
When they had seen him, they spread the word concerning what had been told them about this child, and all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds said to them.
وأما مريم فكانت تحفظ جميع هذا الكلام متفكرة به في قلبها ثم رجع الرعاة وهم يمجدون الله ويسبحونه على كل ما سمعوه وكما قيل لهم.
But Mary treasured up all these things and pondered them in her heart. The shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all the things they had heard and seen, which were just as they had been told. And all of God's people said, Amen. Have a wonderful day today.